Alright, so we're going to build the front steering links. So this did trip me up a little bit. You get a whole bunch of them in your box here. But the pictures for this is not to scale in the manual, but they do give you the measurements. So this whole page is just your front links. Basically, it's the longest one and the shortest one. I did confirm with my handy dandy calipers, but it's the longest one and the shortest one. Now, there's also a whole bunch of different links, ball link ends that they give you here. There's 3 different variants. There's just your standard straight ball end that's flat and straight. There's a whole bunch of curved ones like this that curve that way, and then there's 2 that curve this way. They curve up, but they're flat that way. So these are also numbered, although I don't see the numbers referenced in the manuals. So this is a 1 and a 2 on it. You probably can't see that on the camera, but they are there. So I've got what we need out for this front links. So you got to be careful about stripping these. We do need to put our ball ends in. Now, looking at the page, it looks like there's supposed, like, it looks like maybe there's supposed to be some different ball ends, but from what I can tell, they are all the same. Yeah, looking at this, it looks like they're showing like a flange on one side and not on the other for all of them, but the ball ends they give you have flanges on both sides, so they're identical. So we're going to start by putting our ball ends in. Our pivot points in our ball ends. So I've got these handy dandy Techno shock pliers that work both for shocks, but they also have a ball link in and a ball link out little handle, which is super handy. You can do this with needle nose pliers if that's what you have. I just got these from A-Main. I was sick of doing that. Mostly I got them for the shock plier aspect, because trying to build shocks with needle nose pliers is not enjoyable. And this had this ball link in, so you just kind of line it up like that and you go pop and you're done. Ball link in. So we're going to do that 4 more times, 3 more times. These are very specific about direction, at least with these 2. We're going to start with the short guy. So we need to screw these on until there is exactly a 55 millimeter difference, which I think is just going to be flush at the end of the threads. I'm probably going to need to get some pliers out to finish this. Yes, I most certainly am. Whoa, I'm just knocking everything over. If I can find my pliers. Alright, I use this little set for stuff like this. I don't want to use a bigger set and strip stuff out. So I just use this little set for these kind of things. Actually, I'm going to need 2. So this has a hole in it, which is convenient because you can take, let's see if I have one that'll fit. Do that through one of your tools to give you a whole bunch of leverage. And then, actually, instead of using these, I'm going to go get the right side wrench for this. Just a moment. Okay, it looks like it's a 5/16. So basically, I'm just going to hold onto it with this, and I'm going to crank it around. Yeah, that's not going to fit. You want to make sure you don't cross-thread these when you start it, because that would make things extra difficult. Woo! And also makes things difficult when you launch them across the room. This might not actually be the right size. I'm getting a little slippage. Yeah. Yeah, that's not the right size. Alright, everything else is in millimeters. It's probably this 8 mil. Let's see if this works better. It is plastics. Nope. Alright. Well, we're going to have to use the pliers. Is what it is. That's going to round it off real fast. Actually, instead of using that, we're going to just grab out here. Oh, actually, I can do this. You can use the ball pliers. Hold that. And yeah, there we go. That's the trick. If you've got these fancy techno pliers, that's the way to do it. Start the other side. Try to lose all the parts. And, oh right, this is reverse thread, which always throws everybody for a loop. It's left hand tighty. If you try to right hand tight it, you will go forever. We just do one of these. And that just threads on nicely. Just like that. And it wants them to be at a 90-degree offset from one another. Just like that. So, we're going to double check because this is supposed to be 55 millimeters long. Always zero your tools. And that is dead on. We're about half a mil off. I'm not going to worry about that. That one's done. Now we repeat for the long end. So, same deal. Alright, now it's time to attach the steering links to the front axle. The super glue job on this, it's been about an hour. It has actually seemed to hold pretty well. I'll probably end up regretting that. But, for now, it works. As long as I don't go to put that underdrive gear in the front, I'll be okay. I can always pry it off if I have to. Alright, so, line up everything just like it is in the picture. We've got some real long screws on this one. These are the button heads. If you're newer, you've got your button head type, right, which has a round head. Then you've got your, I believe they're like cap types, right, where they've got this solid kind of ring around them. And then you've got your flush fit screws. These are tapered, right, so they sit flush with the body panel. So in this case we're using button heads as is directed by the manual. This one goes on top. Okay, so this one slides in there. Oh, and this is metal to metal because I'm using my brass portal knuckles, so I need a little dab of the Loctite, which I apparently have closed all the way after my previous mishap. Just a little dab of Loctite on there, and then you got to thread this through both of them, and you want the angles to be curve in. Oops, a little too far. It goes through the first one, and into the second one. And at that point, it starts threading into the base. Just like that. We've got a little bit of protrusion out the bottom, but I did double check to make sure the stainless screw was the same length, and it is. It is a 25 millimeter. That's the longest one I think we've got in the kit. So this guy kind of just flops around there. And we got to put this one through this side. This uses a shorter guy. Apologize for the baby in the background. She is not sleeping well after our trip. Alright, and you don't need to go too hard with those. Alright, so we've got our front steering. So that should now all turn together unless I way overdid it, which I did not. There we go. It's a little stiff. I think I might need to loosen some stuff up. It's not these though. If you're stiff, because these have pivot points, steel pivot points, it's not that. So it's probably one of these. I'm going to leave them for now. Could just... It's smooth. Yeah, we'll leave it. Alright, so now we got to mount our servo. So, I am running an EcoPower WP120T. I'll put a little product highlight right here. For my servo, I've opted to go with the EcoPower WP110T series. This is kind of a more budget-friendly servo. This is a 7.4 voltage servo. That way I can get that extra power out of it using the ESC I've got. I've got one of these in my TRX4. It's pretty good. I believe it's about 400 ounces of torque at 7.4 volts. Yes, it is. So it's got a lot more power than any of those junk stock servos, while still being somewhat budget friendly. And we're back. So we've got the EcoPower. We're going to mount this guy in here. It goes with the gear knob to the right. If you're looking at it the way it is oriented. Let's see, we've got some nice flush fit screws over here. So these I may not have in the stainless kit, I'm assuming. I didn't recall seeing any. Yeah, they're not over there. Those are all button heads. Yeah, so this is another set that this stainless steel kit does not come with, which is disappointing. So I have to use these again. It's not the end of the world, but given the cost of this kit, I would want it to come with everything. So we've got our 4 screws there. We've got our little mounting bracket, and we need a few others. So take our axle. We've got our little mounts right here, and first we're going to mount this on. You want the flush. So if you look at this, you've got a... Sorry, I've got a fly attacking me. You've got a little like angled edge on one side and a 90 degree on the other. Angle goes towards the back, towards the drive shaft here. And this is plastic to plastic, so I don't need any Loctite. Here we use those nice flush fit screws. These do cut their threads into the nylon as you go, so you got to give them a little push at first. Just make sure you are lined up correctly the first time, or they will be crooked. Alright, so now we mount servo. This should be pretty much a dead fit. Yes, it is. Perfect lineup. Again, there's no washers, no Loctite needed for this. It's just into nylon. Whoops. Alright, so I do have this nice little Racing red servo horn that I'm going to be using. I don't really like the plastic ones. Plus this one with this rig, it's right in the front of the rig with it on the axle, so it's really visible. A nice little bit of red bling to go with those red red desert lizard shocks will look good right up in front. So that's going to go right there. Plus these have a little bit of extra clamping force that other ones don't necessarily have. So it looks like what they wanted you to do was to take one of these guys and go up from your standard servo to this size servo horn, which seems, I mean, I guess that helps distribute the force, but for such a cheap little part, this is way easier. So we're just gonna do this. So we need to make sure it's kind of centered, but it's hard to tell if it's centered without it being in there. So we're gonna put this in lightly, and we're gonna see if it how close we get later on. So right at the end when we're plugging our electronics in, we're gonna have to see if this came centered. They're usually close, and that is maybe a 2mm. Usually the servo horns come with, see, that doesn't feel good. I'm going to back that out. We're going to use the set that came with the servo. Sorry, generally not expecting Phillips in Hobby Kit. Get the real. Hi, we're back. Sorry about that. I'm still having overheating problems. It's pretty warm in here. I did find that the stainless steel screw did fit there. So the good thing about these aftermarket servo horns is, unlike the stock one, which you're relying just on this force, this one actually has a little clamping screw on the side. You will need a super small Allen wrench for this. Actually, it's not that small. I apologize. It's a 1.5. I'm not going to put any of the Loctite in here at the moment because this may not be centered. So I'm just going to kind of lightly put things into place to hold them together for the time being. Oh, and I think I put that in the wrong side. It goes in the other side. There's a little recessed hole for the cap. If you've ever built a 24th scale model, you're very used to dealing with these tiny ones. Alright, so we've got that in there. We don't need that stupid screw. What we do need is to go through this into that. So the default one, the factory one, you want to kind of look at how it would sit. And I'm closer to the bottom one than the top one, so we're going to go with the bottom hole. And see, this is where the centering is a little questionable because I got to move it over. Again, this needs to be Loctited, but I may have to take this bit apart once the rig is on, so we're just going to gently put it in there and skip the Loctite for now. There we are. Oh yeah. Got nice full throw almost. I actually think we're being limited by the, no, never mind, we're hitting over here. So yeah, we're getting our full articulation. Perfect. Alright, I've looked at the next few pages of the manual, and I have to build a lot of links. I gotta build all of these links. You've already seen me do that once with the steering links in the back there. Nothing particularly interesting about this. Make sure when you're doing it that you pay attention to which ones are supposed to have which links. If you get that wrong, you're in trouble. But I'm going to do this off camera so I don't bore you. And we're done. Alright, so I've got all of the links assembled right here. However, I was also looking at the instructions, and we do need the shocks next. So, we're going to start building these nice Desert Lizard internally sprung shocks with reservoirs. I'll put my little product description right here. For shocks, I've opted to go with some Desert Lizard internally sprung shocks instead of the stock ones. These are the ones with external reservoirs. Now, I've heard since I bought them that these things leak a lot. I'm going to see if I can make that not happen. I'm also going to be running them at almost full droop setup, probably about 75% droop. So that's why I'm going with the Desert Lizards here instead of the stocks. Plus, that nice red finish is going to look great. And we're going to build these. This is going to be a learning experience. I've never used internally sprung shocks, and I have read online that they tend to leak, but I'm going to see what we can do to prevent that from happening. Alright, so I've gone ahead and built one of these shocks with the reservoirs. I'm going to be honest, the only reason I have the reservoirs is aesthetic. Like, I want the aesthetic look of having those reservoirs mounted to the roll cage of the Capra. But I do want internally sprung full droop suspension. So this one is done. It's got the shock oil in it. I am using a 40 weight shock oil, a little heavier than stock, and I have converted it to full droop, right? So your normal shock, right, is running fully extended. If you're a trail truck, this is fine. You know, if you're racing or whatever, you need that impact. But I want the low CG for a rock crawler. So I've converted this shock over to full droop, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But basically, by default, it's going to sit like this. So when I pull it out, it retracts on its own because I've swapped the spring and put the spring underneath. So that will let me keep my CG down but still retain full articulation. This is the first time I've done a true droop suspension setup where I've got the spring on the opposite side of the piston. I'm kind of running a halfway droop setup on my TRX4 where I've got the collars bottomed all the way out. But we'll go ahead and build one of these. Then I'll do the rest off camera because they are pretty messy to do. And unfortunately, with the Desert Lizard shocks, because they're internally sprung, they don't work on my shock building stand, which is unfortunate. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do this. So it's pretty finicky. Before you get covered in silicone, I suggest taking the reservoir caps off because they are a pain. Put that aside. The standard, if you're just going to use them normally, it's pretty simple. You know, open the top up, fill it. Basically, right, if you're going to use it regularly, you just spin this guy off. Put him to the side. Fill your suspension, put your shock fluid in here. You know, bleed the bubbles out, put the cap back on, repeat with that. But because I want to run droop suspension, I have to take the shock apart completely, well, almost completely. There's a couple E-clips I'm not going to take out, so I'm going to spin the bottom off. I'm going to take the spring out. I'm going to deal with this fly that's driving me nuts, and then I'm going to try real hard to remember which order these O-rings go in. So, this is the part that's hard to do if you've got hands covered in silicone oil. So spin the bottom off here. And then, what was the trick. Take that piece off. That piece goes in here. Put it back in there. That way I don't forget. And then there's some O-rings that need to come out. There we go. There's an O-ring and a plastic cuff. I do believe they have to go in the proper order or you will get leakage. So I'm disassembling them. And there's one more O-ring way down in there that will come out as soon as this comes out. Pop, that O-ring's still in there. That's actually okay. So now what I'm going to do for a full droop setup is shove the spring back in and reassemble. So the spring is on the opposite side, and that just pushed my O-ring out. This part gets a little finicky because the shock is fighting you the whole time. Also, as you're doing this, you want to be putting some silicone on the O-rings. My hands are pretty well covered in silicone, but I'll get in a little dropout here so I can coat those. I'm going to do that O-ring as well. Makes it miserable to work on, but it helps prevent you from having leaks, which everyone says these have, but I don't really see why they would unless they didn't didn't really secure the pieces properly, because they seem pretty well built, unless they're just talking about around the hose. But I mean, I used a little Loctite. I'll show you when I get there. I don't really see that as being a whole lot of a problem, in my opinion. So that's not quite in there. Where did my... you gotta be very careful if you're using some kind of foreign tool. You don't want to push too much and poke that O-ring out or puncture it. Alright, so I'm going to spin the bottom cap back on here. So, the thing oops, and I did that without a part. That would have been bad. The little cuff goes down. And you fight with it. Try not to cross thread it. What is going on here? Okay, we'll push that all the way on and then we'll thread that on. Alright, there we go. So the tricky part here is getting the rod end back on. So what I found worked pretty good is I took the reservoir without the cap on it. I used it to push the shock cap back out. Now these two O-rings sit on the bottom. I'm honestly not quite sure why these two are here. I'm assuming it's kind of to cushion the aluminum so you don't get any kind of impact damage should they hit, because they definitely hit now. And we are reassembled in full droop. Gotta tighten things up a little bit. Alright, so we are converted over to full droop. Now we fill as normal. Take your shock oil. I recommend doing this over a paper towel because you're gonna get it everywhere. And if you can manage to hold the thing down while you put it in initially, you'll save yourself some time. Just dump it in there. Sorry if I'm a little off screen. Dump it in there till you're right at the top. Let the plunger go. And what you're going to do is you're going to cycle that a few times and it's going to pull it all the way down. So you're trying to get that on the opposite side of the plunger. You don't want any bubbles in there. Not leaking. It's just taking it all in. The more you can put in with the shock in the down position, the better. It's just very hard to hold there by yourself. If you have a friend, have them hold the shock while you put the oil in. Alright, see now we're running out of bubbles here, which is good. We don't want any bubbles. If you need like an in-depth how-to on how to fill and purge shocks. There's plenty of stuff out there. The main thing is you want it nice and topped off, like so. Right, I'm right at the top. I'm going to go a little bit more before you put your top cap on. Oh, and of course you want to coat your O-rings with a fine layer of silicone. I just grabbed some off the top of my bottle. And then you want to screw this on. If this were a regular shock, you'd be done. However, these are reservoir shocks, so we have another step to go. You tighten that down, you're going to get some spillover as the threads force it out. That's okay. Set that down with the hole up so you don't lose all your shock oil. If you can try to get a little more in there, but it's pretty messy. There's not a lot of room up there from what I can tell. Plus you're going to have more. So now you take your reservoir, fill this up. This one's easy. There's no plunger. Fill it in till it's topped off. Oops, spill everywhere. Alright, that's nice and full. Grab your top cap for that. Run silicone around that O-ring if you're already covered in it. It's real easy to do. This is very fine threads, particularly difficult to do with slimy hands from all the shock oil. You do not want to cross thread these though. I just cannot quite get it to line up. Alright, I gotta clean my hands a little bit better. There we go. Spin that down as tight as you can. So that one's now very full also. Just put that down standing up. So this is the part that I'm not quite as confident about. So this is your rubber hose for the reservoir. So what we're going to do first is we're going to screw that end in, which is pretty easy. I'm going to put just the tiniest dab, sorry, this fly is driving me nuts, the tiniest dab of Loctite on there. And you take that and you screw that in. Now, it's probably not great to mix the Loctite and the silicone. It probably doesn't help the Loctite adhere at all. But there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to get that cleaner, cleaned up enough. So, all right, so that side is on nice and good. Now, the hose is filled with air. I tried to do this on the last one, I'm going to try to very slowly drip some extra oil in there. But see, it's probably too small to see. I've got a bubble that I have to pop, and then I got to do it again. And another bubble forms, and you got to pop that one. So I don't know how much of this is actually going in this tube. The shock works kind of regardless. So, like the other one, I don't think I got all the air out of this part of it, and it seems to work okay. Well, good. So, I think we'll call that good. You take your, you want some Loctite. So we're just going to clean those threads up a little bit. Plenty of silicone on that O-ring already. Put another super tiny dab of Loctite. I'm assuming this is probably the step that people are not doing. The manual does not say to do it, but it's a metal-metal connection, which means you should be using Loctite. Granted, it's very silicone-y. There we go. And it is complete. Let me get cleaned up a little, we'll do a function check here. Because those are very messy. Far messier than regular shocks. And everything I've read after the fact is they are not really worth the extra with the reservoirs, but I want that scale look. Do all kinds of things for scale that don't make sense. So, moment of truth. Nice, excellent. Good movement. We're not hydro locked. Everything seems tight. Actually, tight now. Yeah, no, it's just as tight. Perfect. And there you have it. One set of full droop reservoir desert lizards, 100 millimeter. I don't think I said that in the product spotlight. These are 100 millimeter. I believe that's what the stock ones are. They might be 90. I'm going to be running some shock tower relocators that'll let me run at the proper lower height. That we'll see when we get there. I'm going to do the last two off camera, and we'll be right back. All right, I've got all of the shocks assembled over here. They all feel pretty good. I had the same problem with all of the hoses. I'm not sure if that will matter. Also, I'll note I couldn't find anywhere how much fluid these took. I bought these Factory Team 4 fluid ounces bottles. I bought 2 of them because I wasn't sure how far they would go. You do not need 2 of those. I used about maybe a fifth of the bottle. And I have 2 bottles. So I have enough 40 weight to last forever now. So we're going to move on to installing some links and some suspension on the axles. So we've got our 90 millimeter links here. We've got all the balls in them already. We've got 2 sets of shocks, which we are going to need. And we need some nice long 25 millimeter screws. So I believe we're oriented. We need these to go this way. Yep, this way. So these 2 ends come together like that. And they do it by going through the shocks. So it goes, the shocks are on the outside and the rod is in the inside, it looks like. So we'll put that way. Yeah, that goes there. And that goes there. And then we thread the screw. What am I threading into? It looks like it's just threading into nylon. So, put you in. Line you up till you're just about coming out the next one. Put the next, and then you can let go of that shock. Put this one in. And these little balls can be a little finicky sometimes. Put that in. There we go. That looks pretty good. We need our Allen wrench, which I have, or our hex, which I have, of course, lost at some point while doing the shocks. Oh, there it is. All right. You turn your portals out of the way. And again, this is going into nylon, so no need to go crazy here. And that's it. We're going to repeat on the other side. All right. That is that. Moving on, we have to do the other set of links. So these are the short links with the straight rod ends. And those are going to go up in here on each. So we'll flip those out of the way. And this uses a 14 mil, which I believe Alright, so these don't matter which way they go, both ends are the same. So we slot that in there, slot that in, and screw it in. That done for now. Move that out of the way. Be careful not to damage our very delicate shocks. Get our long ones with the curves on them. And 2 more shocks. And our 25mm screws, which should be, the shocks go on the outside as well. Just gotta make sure. Oops, too far. And then these have that same inward slant. There we go. And there it is. No real trick there. I'm just going to get it to line up. And our upper rod ends. You should make sure that your little nubs on each notches on each side are the same. That way, if you ever need to adjust them, you can spin them both the same direction. Having the right screws would again help. So, get our shocks out of the way. Line this up. The rear link's done. So our next step, we're going to get into the transmission. I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. It's getting pretty late, and that will definitely be in another video.